Welcome to another deep dive. You guys sent in a bunch of articles about China's economy.
Yeah.
And, there's this kind of warning sign flashing in all these reports.
Yeah.
It's about the Chinese middle class.
Okay, yeah.
It seems like they might be,
Declining.
declining. Yeah. So let's try to break this down. What are these experts saying? And what could this mean?
Well, it looks like you found some really interesting articles here.
Yeah.
The articles all seem to be saying that this isn't just some temporary thing.
Mm-hmm.
This could be a turning point for China's entire economic way of doing things.
Wow.
And what's really interesting here is that this analysis isn't coming from some outsider.
Right.
It's coming from Fu Peng.
Okay.
He's a well-respected economist in China.
So Fu Peng, he gave this speech and it just blew up online and then poof,
Yeah.
censored.
Censored. I got to know more.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's not just making these, doomsday predictions.
Right.
He's really breaking down these complex problems in the system. Okay, so both of these articles mention this observation from Fu Peng
Right.
about ride-sharing drivers in China.
Mm.
So apparently there's been this surge of 20 million people becoming ride-sharing drivers.
Wow.
And that could be a sign that the middle class is shrinking.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, 20 million people moving down the economic ladder,
Yeah, that's a huge shift.
what does that even tell us?
Well, Fu Peng is arguing that this whole decline actually started back in 2019,
Really?
even before the pandemic.
Wow.
He says there was a drop in spending even back then.
So people weren't buying as much.
Exactly.
So this isn't just because of COVID
Right.
or some kind of trade war fallout.
Right. It seems like something deeper is going on
Yeah.
within China.
The articles even talk about luxury brands
Oh, yeah.
taking a hit.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, it looks like the middle class is being squeezed from all
Mhm.
sides.
Yeah.
Living costs are going up.
Right.
Wages aren't keeping up.
And the housing market.
Oh, yeah. The housing market's a whole other story.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
So remember that housing boom back in 2015, 2016?
Yeah.
Fu Peng says that those prices going way up.
Mm-hmm.
They made people feel richer than they really were.
Right.
But it wasn't based on real income growth.
No, it wasn't.
It just put people in a ton of debt.
Yeah. He gives this crazy example.
What is it?
Imagine buying a house for 6 million yuan
Okay.
when your income can really only handle a 2 million yuan house.
Ooh, that's going to be a problem.
It's like mortgaging your future.
For decades,
Yeah.
just to keep up.
Exactly.
And now those prices,
Yeah.
they're becoming a huge problem.
For who?
The younger generations.
They can't afford to buy in.
Nope. It's like this game of hot potato, but nobody wants to catch it anymore.
So, okay, if the middle class is shrinking,
Yeah.
younger generation can't pick up the slack.
Right.
What happens to China's economic engine?
Yeah. Where's the growth come from? One of the articles mentions the 80s generation in China.
Okay.
They were the ones who really powered China's consumption boom.
They had the family support, the incomes, the easy credit.
Yeah, exactly.
What happens when they get older?
And they can't spend like that anymore.
Yeah, I mean, they were a huge driver of growth if
But
they start pulling back on spending.
Things could change drastically.
Yeah.
I mean, with fewer young people to take on all that debt,
Mm-hmm.
China's whole strategy of relying on internal demand,
Yeah.
that might not work anymore.
This is a big shift away from growth at all costs.
For sure.
Okay, now, this is where things get a little tricky.
Okay.
One article mentions Fu Peng describing China's economic approach as JKQ.
JKQ.
Yeah, so basically, the government picks certain industries,
Right.
pours resources into them,
Okay.
helps them become dominant.
And then we
What
have
happens after that?
the K stands for knockout.
Knockout.
Like they're creating this greenhouse for businesses.
Okay.
They grow strong in this controlled environment.
Right.
And then they're shoved out into the wild to compete.
That's the knockout.
Yeah. It can lead to some really intense competition.
Wow, and what about prices?
They often drop way down.
And this works as long as
There's enough demand in China.
you support all these industries.
Exactly.
But what if that demand dries up?
Uh-oh.
What if, like we've been talking about, the
Right.
middle class is shrinking, people are struggling?
Right.
Then what?
That's the big risk Fu Peng is talking about.
Okay.
This whole JKQ model.
Mm-hmm.
It needs a constantly expanding market.
To keep those businesses going.
Yeah, when they hit that knockout stage,
But if that foundation weakens,
it could all fall apart.
it makes sense.
It really highlights how all these factors are connected.
Yeah.
The shrinking middle class, the housing bubble, this JKQ model.
It's all tied together.
Exactly. And it really makes you wonder,
What can China do?
yeah, what options do they have to navigate this?
Well, one of the articles compares China to Japan
Yeah.
and how Japan tried to deal with similar economic problems
Mm.
by investing overseas.
Right. Could China try that?
Could they?
Well, Fu Peng says the world is a very different place now
Okay.
than it was back then.
During Japan's time.
Yeah, there's a lot more tension between China and other countries, and countries are a lot more wary of Chinese investments these days.
Especially in, like, technology.
Exactly.
So China can't just buy their way out of this
That's not that simple anymore.
by, like, snapping up foreign companies or,
Right.
flooding the market with Chinese products.
There's a lot more resistance now.
Yeah, so if they can't go global so easily,
Mhm.
what can they do?
At home.
Yeah.
Well, Fu Peng has an idea.
Okay.
It's a little radical.
Oh, really? What is it?
He suggests that maybe
Yeah.
China needs to think about redistributing wealth.
Oh, okay.
He even mentions things like inheritance tax and property tax.
Those are some pretty bold ideas.
They are.
And I bet controversial.
Oh, for sure.
But could this be what China needs?
To rebalance its economy.
I think we need to take a step back here.
I agree.
Look at the bigger picture.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground, but
We've only scratched the surface.
absolutely,
Yeah.
this is just the beginning. So if investing overseas isn't really an option for China right now,
Yeah.
how do they deal with these economic problems at home?
Right.
That's where this idea of redistributing wealth comes in.
So, like, inheritance tax,
Yeah,
property tax,
exactly. Things that could bring in some money for the government.
and maybe help with that wealth gap.
Exactly. But,
Yeah,
these are really sensitive topics in China.
I bet.
They challenge some pretty deep beliefs about wealth and social mobility.
It's not just about the economics.
No, it's political too.
Wouldn't these policies be super unpopular?
That's a good question.
Like, what's the appetite for that in China?
We have to remember that Fu Peng isn't just making these suggestions out of nowhere.
Right.
He knows the political situation in China.
He's not just some,
Ivory tower academic.
Yeah,
Detached from the real world.
right.
He gets it.
Well, one of the articles even mentions that his speech was censored,
Yeah.
probably because he talked about these sensitive issues.
Right, and that tells you something.
It's like he's throwing a grenade into the conversation,
I like that.
forcing people to confront these uncomfortable truths.
Yeah, and it really highlights another important takeaway.
What's that?
China's economy isn't just about numbers.
Okay.
It's connected to social trends,
Hmm.
political pressures, even generational divides.
Like how the 80s generation.
Yeah.
They're making good money now, but they have so many expenses.
Housing, education, taking care of their parents.
Right, that's gotta be tough.
It is. And that brings us back to that demographic time bomb.
The one we talked about earlier?
Yeah. If that generation starts spending less
It could have a ripple effect.
on the whole economy.
So for everyone listening,
Yeah.
why should you care about all of this?
About China's middle class.
Yeah, how does this affect anyone outside of China?
That's a great question.
What are the takeaways?
Well, first of all, I think it challenges this idea,
The one we hear all the time.
about China's unstoppable rise.
Right, the reality is,
Way more complicated.
yeah, it's like looking under the hood of a shiny new car.
And you see,
And it's not so new.
exactly.
What else?
Second, I think it helps us understand the global impact.
Of China's economy.
Exactly. I mean, if their internal market weakens,
Yeah,
it could affect everything.
true.
Geopolitics, even.
We're all connected.
We are.
Third,
Yeah.
economic data doesn't tell the whole story.
Right.
We have to think about the social and political context, too.
Absolutely. To really understand the challenges.
Is a country like China's facing?
It's about connecting the dots.
Yeah, seeing how everything fits together.
Exactly. I mean, those 20 million ride-sharing drivers,
Yeah,
they're a symptom of something much bigger.
that's reshaping China's economy.
And that has implications for everyone.
Totally agree. It's all connected. So I want to hear more about this JKQ approach.
Okay.
We touched on it earlier.
Yeah.
But I'd love to get your take on how it might be failing.
Given all these challenges.
Right.
Okay, so the JKQ model, it's like a 3-step process.
Okay.
First, the government picks these strategic sectors.
Right.
Then they pour resources into them.
To help them dominate.
And then comes the K.
The knockout.
Yeah, it's like they're taking these companies they've been supporting and just throwing them into this arena.
To fight it out.
They have to face all this competition.
And prices.
Prices usually plummet.
So they're in this like protected bubble.
Yeah.
And then bam.
The bubble bursts.
Sink or swim.
Exactly. And that's where China's shrinking middle class comes in.
Okay.
If there aren't enough people in China.
To buy all this stuff.
Yeah. To buy all the products these companies are making.
Mm-hmm.
That knockout phase.
Yeah.
It can be a real problem.
The knockout punch.
It leads to overcapacity, price wars, you name it.
So they build this huge factory.
Yeah.
Making all these awesome products.
Right.
But then...
nobody can afford to buy them.
Exactly.
And this seems to be what Fu Peng is worried about.
Okay.
He's saying that this JKQ model might have worked fine.
Back in the day.
Yeah, when the economy was booming.
When everyone was spending money.
But now with the middle class shrinking.
Yeah, and young people drowning in debt.
The whole equation changes.
The knockout phase is riskier.
Way riskier. The stakes are higher.
It's like musical chairs.
Ooh, I like that.
When the music stops, there aren't enough chairs.
And somebody's going to be left standing.
And that's what China could be facing.
Potentially.
And that's not good.
No, not just for those companies.
Well, for the whole economy.
Exactly. It's a domino effect.
Companies struggle. People lose jobs.
Spending drops even more.
And it keeps going.
And it keeps going a downward spiral.
So what can they do?
How can they fix this? Well, Fu Peng's idea about redistributing wealth.
Through taxes.
Right. That's one option.
It could help with revenue for social programs.
And boost spending.
It's like rebalancing a seesaw.
Yeah. Trying to even things out.
What else could they do?
Well, they could try to focus more on innovation.
Moving up the value chain.
Exactly. Instead of just making a ton of stuff.
They could make fewer things.
Higher quality.
Fewer specialized.
Yeah, things that will sell for more on the global market.
That's not easy.
No, it takes a lot of investment.
In education research.
And they need to create an environment that encourages risk-taking.
So it's a long game.
It is, but it could help China grow in a more sustainable way.
And avoid that middle income trap.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
What's the biggest takeaway for our listeners?
I think the key takeaway here is that China's economy, it's complicated.
More than we think.
Yeah, the headlines might focus on trade wars or,
Geopolitical stuff.
Right. But the real story is often much deeper.
It's about demographics, social trends.
And a total rethinking of their economic model.
We've seen how everything is connected.
Right.
The decline of the middle class, the housing bubble, the JKQ model.
China's global ambition.
It's all intertwined.
And that's what makes this deep dive so important.
Yeah, it gives us a much clearer picture of what China is dealing with.
Absolutely.
And as always,
yeah,
we encourage you to keep learning about this.
These articles are just the beginning.
Keep asking questions.
Stay curious.
The journey of knowledge never really ends.
It doesn't.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Until next time.
Keep exploring.
Hey everyone. Ready for another deep dive? Looks like you guys are interested in the future of China's economy.
Yeah, it's a hot topic for sure.
Well, we've got some pretty juicy stuff to unpack.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely. We're looking at a speech by economist Fu Peng.
Okay.
He presented this at a HSBC Private Wealth Planning event in Shanghai just last month.
Wow, so pretty recent then.
Yeah, November 24th, 2024 to be exact.
Very cutting edge.
Super recent. So we're getting those insider insights.
For sure.
Get ready for some serious eye-openers about the challenges and the potential turning points ahead for China.
Okay.
And stick with us to see what it all means for you.
I'm ready.
Awesome. So one thing that really struck me about Fu Peng's analysis is that he doesn't just focus on the usual economic indicators, like GDP growth or trade balances.
Yeah.
He takes this much broader view, arguing that there's this fundamental ideological shift happening.
Oh, interesting.
Globally. This move from left-leaning to right-leaning thinking. And he believes this shift, which he kind of traces back to gaining momentum around 2016.
2016, okay.
Is reshaping global systems in a really profound way.
You know what's so interesting about that is it's not just about politics, right?
Yeah.
This ideological shift.
Right.
It really does impact, everything.
It totally does.
Yeah.
Okay, so how does this ideological shift actually play out in the real world?
Right. Well, Fu Peng, he uses this really helpful analogy.
Okay.
He calls it the pyramid analogy.
Okay, a pyramid analogy.
To explain his view of the global economy. So imagine a pyramid, right?
Okay.
Where at the very base, the foundation is assets and markets.
Okay.
So that's the foundational stuff, right?
Got it, yeah.
And then the middle layer of this pyramid is economics and politics.
Okay.
The systems that kind of manage those assets and markets.
Okay, so the systems that kind of build upon that base.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then finally, right at the very top, the pointy part of the pyramid.
Right, the tip.
Exactly, is ideology.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of it's driving everything else.
Right, so ideology is the driving force behind everything else.
Yeah, it shapes how we design our economic and political system.
I see, so it kind of trickles down from there.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
And what's important here is that Fu Peng, he's not saying whether this shift from from left to right is good or bad.
He's just observing it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He's simply saying it's happening and that it's impacting everything.
Everything.
Investment strategies,
Wow.
trade relationships,
Yeah.
even how individual companies operate.
So for our listeners out there, I mean, this means that
Yeah.
understanding this ideological shift it's crucial.
It really is.
It's like the underlying current that's
Yeah.
changing the entire game.
Exactly.
It's not just about China. It's like a global shift that's going to affect all of us.
Precisely.
Wow. Okay. So bringing it back to China specifically.
Yeah.
Fu Peng argues that the country's economic woes, they run a lot deeper than official data suggests.
When official data suggests,
Yeah, so he's saying, like, we need to look beyond just the numbers.
beyond the numbers, yeah.
And understand this concept of effective demand.
Okay, effective demand.
Effective demand, yes.
Interesting.
Okay, so effective demand, what does that even mean?
Right, so it's not just about how much money people have.
Okay.
It's about how much they're actually willing and able to spend.
Oh, okay.
So even if people have money saved up, if they're feeling uncertain about the future,
Yeah.
they might just hold back on spending.
Makes sense.
And that has a huge impact on economic growth.
Right, because that money is not circulating.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so imagine this, right?
Okay.
You're a young professional in China.
Okay.
You're burdened with,
Yes.
student loans, sky-high housing costs.
Right.
Do you have much left over to spend on things like
Right.
travel, entertainment, or even, starting a family?
Yeah, good point.
Right. This is how effective demand plays out in real life.
It does.
And it's something that Fu Peng thinks China needs to address, like urgently.
Urgently, got it.
To illustrate this point, he talks about the surge in ride-hailing drivers in China
Oh, yeah.
recently. Where did all these drivers come from?
Right, right.
Yeah,
it's an interesting question, isn't it?
it is. And he believes it's a sign of this shrinking middle class
Okay.
that's kind of being forced into these lower paying jobs
Well, I see.
due to these economic pressures.
Right, and so that shrinking middle class
Yeah.
impacts effective demand.
Exactly.
Fewer people in the middle class means fewer people spending money.
Right.
Which then has, a ripple effect throughout the whole economy.
That's right.
Yeah.
And this shrinking middle class, I mean, it kind of makes you wonder if this model that fueled China's economic boom for so long
Yeah.
is even sustainable anymore.
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, because Fu Peng, he points to these two main pillars of China's incredible growth.
Okay.
Right. So there's the massive population boom.
Right.
And then there's easy access to credit and leverage.
Okay, yeah.
But both of those pillars, I mean, they're starting to crumble.
Starting to crumble. How so?
Yeah, so China's population, it's aging rapidly.
Right.
And younger generations are drowning in debt.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Fu Peng, he shares this kind of shocking anecdote, actually,
Okay.
about an apartment that was bought for 2 million yuan
Okay.
and is now being sold for 6 million.
Wow, that's a huge jump.
And he points out that this represents 40
Yeah.
years of a young person's future earnings
Oh, wow.
extracted up front just to buy a place to live.
Just to get on the property ladder.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It is.
I mean, that really highlights the question of sustainability.
It does.
Like, can this model, where young people are essentially mortgaging their future
Right.
just to get on the property ladder, really continue?
Right. And it's not even just a China problem either.
That's true. It's not.
It's so many countries have relied on similar growth models.
All right.
Population growth plus easy credit, and now face similar reckonings.
Exactly. It's a global phenomenon.
It is. So if the old model is broken,
Yeah.
what's the solution?
Right. Well, Fu Peng's pretty blunt about this.
Yeah, he is.
He says that China must redistribute wealth
Redistribute wealth.
and resources to boost effective demand.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so that's a pretty big statement.
Redistribution. That's a pretty, that's a pretty loaded term.
It is.
What would that even look like
Yeah.
in practice for China?
Right. Well, it could mean things like
Yeah.
increased government spending on social programs,
Okay.
stronger social safety nets, maybe even changes to the tax system.
Wow.
These are big, big questions. And frankly, it's hard to say how politically feasible any of those things are
That's true.
in China's current context.
Yeah, and the potential ramifications are just huge.
They're massive.
I mean, we're talking about effects on investment markets,
Yeah.
inflation, even social stability. I mean,
Right.
this impacts not just China,
No,
but the global economy as a whole.
absolutely.
Wow. Oh. Okay, so before we jump into the potential outcomes of redistribution.
Okay.
Let's take a look at how Fu Peng kind of characterizes the Chinese government's approach to business.
Right.
He uses this pretty interesting analogy. He calls it the JQK model.
JQK model.
JQK model, yeah.
I'm intrigued. What's that all about?
I know, right? JQK, what does that even mean?
Yeah, break it down for us.
Okay, so think of it like a card game, right?
Okay.
With the government as the dealer.
The government is the dealer.
So J stands for encouraging investment.
Okay.
It's like a big welcome sign saying, come on in, invest in China.
Got it. Come on in.
Right.
Okay.
Then Q is about keeping that money flowing.
Okay.
Within the system, once it's there.
Keep the money flowing.
So far, so good.
Yeah, so far, so good.
Sounds pretty standard, for attracting foreign investment.
Pretty typical approach.
But then there's K, and that's where it gets interesting.
Okay, K.
Yeah.
This is where things get spicy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
K is for kicking businesses out.
Kicking businesses out. Wow.
Into the free market.
Into the free market. Okay.
Often, once the government has achieved its strategic goals in that sector.
Oh, I see.
It's like the government saying, all right, we've learned what we need.
We've learned what we need.
Time to sink or swim on your own.
Oh, wow.
Right.
Right. So it's strategic.
It's strategic.
And maybe a little cynical.
It's a little cynical.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, how businesses can even plan for the long term.
Right.
When the rules of the game can change so dramatically.
It definitely adds a layer of complexity to doing business in China.
Yeah.
For sure.
But you know what?
Yeah.
Understanding this JQK cycle, it can actually be helpful.
Helpful? How so?
Yeah, because if you can anticipate which sectors the government is going to prioritize and then withdraw from,
right,
you can make more informed investment decisions.
That's a good point.
Right.
So it's like learning to read the dealer's tells in that card game.
It is.
Yeah.
If you can anticipate those moves, you might be able to stay one step ahead.
That's interesting.
Right. But this brings up another big piece of the puzzle.
Right.
China's currency situation.
Oh, right.
And how that plays into all of this.
Oh, of course. The yuan.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Fu Peng, he dives into this concept called the impossible trinity of economics.
The impossible trinity.
The impossible trinity.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay, I've heard of this.
Have you?
Yeah. It's a pretty fundamental concept in international economics.
It is.
Okay, so for our listeners who might not be familiar, the impossible trinity is this idea that a country can only have two of the following three things.
Okay.
Free capital flow, a fixed exchange rate, and an independent monetary policy.
Okay, break that down for us.
All right, so let's start with free capital flow.
Okay.
That means money can move easily in and out of the country.
Okay, got it.
A fixed exchange rate means that the value of the country's currency is pegged to another currency, like the U.S. dollar.
So it's tied to that.
It's tied to it, yeah.
Okay.
And independent monetary policy means that the country's central bank, they can set interest rates and control the money supply.
All right.
Without being constrained by those other two factors.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay, so why is it called the impossible trinity?
Right, because these three things, they tend to conflict with each other.
Oh, okay.
So, for example, let's say you have free capital flow and a fixed exchange rate.
Yeah.
But then you want to lower interest rates to stimulate your economy.
Okay, yeah.
What could happen is foreign investors might pull their money out.
Oh.
Which puts downward pressure on your currency. And that might force you to raise interest rates again.
Wow, so you're kind of stuck.
You're kind of stuck, yeah.
Okay, so it's this constant balancing act.
Exactly, it's a balancing act.
You're trying to manage these three competing forces.
Competing forces, yeah.
And Fu Peng's argument is that China right now is struggling to balance these three elements.
Balance the impossible trinity.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he predicts that interest rates are likely to stay low.
Yeah.
Fiscal spending will increase.
Yeah.
And the yuan will probably depreciate.
Okay, so let's unpack that a little bit.
Yes, let's unpack that for our listeners.
Because if the yuan depreciates, wouldn't that make Chinese goods cheaper for consumers in other countries?
It could. It could make Chinese exports more competitive on the global market.
Right.
But it also means that Chinese consumers will have less purchasing power.
Oh.
As imported goods will become more expensive.
So it's kind of a double-edged sword.
Exactly. It's a trade-off. Okay, and what about the impact on investments?
Right, that's a good question.
Would a depreciating yuan make it less attractive to invest in China?
Well, that's a key question that investors are grappling with right now.
I bet.
A depreciating yuan, it could erode the value of investments in yuan-denominated assets.
Yeah.
But it could also create opportunities.
Oh. Okay.
In sectors that benefit from a weaker currency, like export-oriented industries.
So there's a lot of uncertainty there.
There's a lot of uncertainty.
And potential volatility.
Definitely.
Both for businesses operating in China and for investors.
Absolutely.
So does Fu Peng, does he offer any concrete advice?
It's interesting. He doesn't actually try to offer a simple solution or a definitive prediction. Instead, he lays out the complexities of the situation.
Okay.
And encourages his audience to think critically.
I see.
About the potential outcomes. He acknowledges that there are no easy answers.
Yeah.
Especially with this impossible Trinity dilemma.
It sounds like a very honest and realistic approach.
I think so. He's not trying to sell a particular viewpoint or investment strategy.
He's not pushing an agenda.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He's just trying to provide a framework for understanding the challenges and the potential turning points.
And those turning points are, they could go in a lot of different directions.
They really could.
It sounds like, while this deep dive isn't giving us, easy answers, it is giving us the tools to kind of think through this
definitely
complex situation.
It's giving us a framework to approach these issues.
And come to our own conclusions.
Exactly.
I think it's also important to remember that Fu Peng's perspective isn't the only one out there.
That's a great point. It's crucial to remember that.
Yeah.
There are multiple perspectives on China's economic future.
Totally.
Some analysts are much more optimistic.
Yeah. And they focus on China's potential for innovation and technological development.
Right. That's a whole other side of the story.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you have those who are more pessimistic, who highlight the risks of rising debt and demographic changes.
So it's really not about finding the right answer.
Yeah.
It's more about understanding that range of possibilities.
It's about understanding the spectrum.
Yeah, and the factors that kind of support those different viewpoints.
And that's where critical thinking is so important.
Right.
We need to be able to evaluate information, question assumptions, consider different interpretations.
It's about, building our own analytical muscles.
Absolutely, especially in a world where we're just bombarded with information from every direction.
It's true.
Constantly.
All the time.
Yeah.
So for our listeners who were deep diving into this with us, how do they start to make sense of it all?
That's the big question, right? Where do we even go from here? Where do we go from here?
Well, a great place to start, I think, is by considering the impact of these economic shifts on specific sectors or industries.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So, think about the sectors that you're personally interested in.
Right.
Maybe those related to your work or your investments.
That's a good point, yeah.
And ask yourself, how might those be affected by the trends that we've been discussing? Yeah,
so instead of trying to, predict the future of China's whole economy, you're saying it might be more useful to focus on specific areas of interest.
Specific areas.
Yeah.
And don't forget about the human element here.
Oh, that's a good point.
As you're researching these trends, try to find stories about how everyday people in China are experiencing these changes.
Right. What's the ground truth?
Exactly.
Yeah.
What are their hopes, their fears, their aspirations?
That's such an important point because, those are the things that are often overlooked.
They are. They're often lost.
In these big picture economic discussions,
it's
easy to get lost in the data.
The abstract concepts, but at the end of the day, it's those human stories that really matter.
It's the people.
It is, yeah. And understanding the human impact of these economic shifts can give you a much deeper, more nuanced perspective.
I like that, a nuanced perspective.
Yeah, it helps you see beyond the headlines.
Right.
And truly grasp the complexities of what's happening in China.
This has been such a great conversation, I feel like.
Yeah, we do.
We've covered so much ground.
So much.
But at the same time, I feel like we've only just, scratched the surface.
Scratched the surface.
A little bit.
That's the thing about fascinating topics. The more you learn, the more you realize there's so much more to discover.
There's always more to learn.
And this exploration of China's economic crossroads is a perfect example. There's so much depth there.
So, for our listener who's on this deep dive journey with us, we just want to encourage you to keep exploring.
Keep exploring, absolutely.
Keep asking those tough questions.
Yeah.
Keep seeking out those different perspectives. And most importantly, don't be afraid to challenge your own assumptions.
Your own assumptions, that's crucial.
Yeah.
Remember, the goal isn't necessarily to find all the answers.
No.
It's about engaging with these complex issues.
Right.
Broadening your understanding and developing your own informed perspective.
Your own informed perspective. It's about that journey.
It is.
Yeah. Well, we hope this deep dive has equipped you with some valuable insight.
Some food for thought.
Yeah, and sparked your curiosity.
Absolutely.
To learn even more.
To keep digging.
Happy exploring.
Happy exploring, everyone.
Yeah.